let's talk about something that does not get said enough in our industry, and that's that growing your design firm is not necessarily going to be easy, and it's not going to make your business feel easier. In fact, sometimes growth is the very thing that exposes everything in your business that has been held together by your talent and your memory and your urgency and your ability to personally rescue every single detail. And from the outside, growth looks like success, but inside, oof, it can feel really, really heavy. Don't get me wrong, you've got bigger projects, better clients, a team, more visibility, even more revenue, and maybe a gorgeous portfolio of work. But if you're also feeling like, gosh, more pressure and maybe more client expectations, maybe you're even experiencing more overhead according to your bookkeeper or CPA, and somehow less time is actually given to design, I want you to hear this. You are not doing it wrong. You are experiencing the trade-offs of growth. And today we're going to talk about those trade-offs that nobody else wants to talk about when you're growing this firm and how to move through them without losing your standards, your profitability, your creativity, and most importantly, yourself. Welcome back to Success by Design, the podcast for interior designers who want to build a profitable, sustainable, beautifully run business and not just a beautiful portfolio. I'm glad you're here today because today's episode is one of those conversations I wish more designers were having honestly. And there is so much content out there about how to grow, how to get more clients, how to do the bigger projects, how to build a team, how to increase your revenue, and how to become known. And don't get me wrong, I love growth. If you've been listening for any time, you know that I absolutely love growth and I coach interior designers to growth. I'm an active interior designer myself with a multi-million-dollar firm, so I know what it feels like to want to get bigger and build that stronger brand and create team support as well as creative expansion. But I also know this. Growth is not just an increase in your volume. Growth is a change instead in your responsibility. And it asks you to become a different kind of business owner. This is what we call CEOing. Don't get me wrong. At one stage, the business needs you to be the designer and the visionary and the salesperson and the client whisperer and the project manager and the person who answers every question. But at the next stage, the business needs you to step into leadership. And leadership is not just doing more important things. I really want you to hear me on that. Leadership is learning how to make the business less dependent on you as the constant and let it be successful in the first place, because that is what real scaling is all about. It isn't about more hustle. It's not about more projects. It's not just hiring more people and hoping that your load gets easier. Scaling instead is going to require that structure and financial discipline and a decision-making framework that your team can actually follow whether your booty is in the seat or not. It's going to require clear client communication. And maybe most importantly, it's going to require you to stop being the emergency system inside of your business. Yeah, in fact, ASID's 2025 State of Interior Design Report noted that small businesses drive 75% of industry sales, which matters because most design firms are not giant corporations with layers of structure. They are small businesses, often built around the reputation, taste, and capacity of the principal designer. So when growth starts to feel heavy, it is not because you are weak. It is because many firms are growing before their business model and operations and leadership structure are ready to support that growth. And this is what we're going to unpack today. I want to start by laying out this scenario because here is what I see in my coaching practice that typically happens. You start your design firm, and in the beginning it is hard, but it is simple. Not easy, but simple. You know every client, you know every order, you know every fabric, you know what has been approved and what is still pending, which contractor needs a decision, which client is nervous about the budget, and which vendor is delayed, and exactly where every project stands. And the business works because you work. You are the system. And in the early stage, that can feel really, really powerful and invigorating because you can move quickly and pivot, and you can personally make sure everything is right. Then the business starts to grow. and you start getting more inquiries and your projects get larger and you raise your fees and you bring on help, whether that's a procurement person, a project manager, a bookkeeper. And at first you think, finally, this is going to give me my time back. But then something happens. And instead of feeling freer, you feel more interrupted. And your team is technically helping, but they're also asking you all the questions every single day. Those questions like, can you approve this? Do you like this option? How should I answer the client? Which vendor would you use? Can you review the proposal? Can you jump in the meeting? Can you look at this before it goes out? Not only are you doing the work, you are reviewing the work, you're correcting the work, you're explaining the work, and you find yourself probably going, I should have just done the work in the first place because this is so freaking hard. And you're still responsible for that final quality output. And this is where a lot of designers quietly start resenting the very growth that they worked so hard to create. They start thinking, why is this all still on me? All right, time for the honest truth. The reason why is because the business has grown, but the way the decisions are made inside the business has not. And the team has grown, but the standards have not fully transferred yet. And the project size has grown, but the process has not matured. And there is this painful middle place that you're hanging out in because you are no longer the solo designer, but you are not yet leading a firm that can operate with true clarity and true consistency. And this middle stage, gosh, feels like the teen years. It can be confusing. Everything's going the way it should be, but it's really awkward. Yeah, the projects are better, the numbers may be bigger, and the brand may be stronger, but inside your nervous system is screaming. The business is depending on you too much. Okay, so what's really going on here? And this is where I see a lot of designers misdiagnosing the actual problem that's happening in their business. Because the default is, gosh, I really need more people. And sometimes that is true. Sometimes you have made the wrong hire, or sometimes someone is not the right fit. But many times team is not the root issue. The issue instead is that your team is trying to operate inside of a business where all of it lives in your head. They do not know your decision-making criteria. They don't know what client ready really means, and they don't know where they have authority and where they don't, where you're flexible on details, where you're not flexible. And so they keep coming back to you, not necessarily because they're incapable, but because they are trying not to get it wrong. All right, the second misdiagnosis I see is I need more clients. Now, this one can be really dangerous because if your current projects are already exposing cracks in your business, adding more clients, well, it doesn't solve the problem. It takes those cracks and makes them look like the Grand Canyon. See, more clients do not fix unclear scope or underpricing or that lack of role clarity we just talked about. See, more clients, they don't actually give you your time back or remove you as the bottleneck from every meaningful decision. See, sometimes the next level of growth is not more demand. It is making the demand you already have more profitable, organized, and less dependent upon you. The final misdiagnosis I want to talk about is, gosh, I just really need to push through this. And designers, I see you. You're incredibly good at pushing through this. This is why some of you hop on a call and burst into tears. You can make it beautiful under pressure. You can solve problems on site. You can calm the client. And that ability is a wicked skill. It is part of what made you so successful. But it can also become that thing that keeps the business immature. Because if your solution is always personal effort, you never have to develop a better structure. In fact, McKinsey has written about the difficulty of moving from founder-led growth to more scalable operations. And that concept applies directly to interior design firms. The early business often works because of your energy and instincts. And the next stage business has to work because of operating models that are strong enough to carry the work. And that is the shift. It's the shift from I can handle it to the business can hold it. I was just on a call this morning pitching a $7 million deal. And one of the questions the client asked me point blank was, do you and your firm have the capacity to handle this? I love that question. And I said categorically, yes, we do. We can absolutely handle this because I know the people in the seats, because I know our systems, I know our processes, I know what we're capable of. So, what is really happening when we feel these pinch points in our business and when everything starts to feel harder, when you were actually just expecting everything to feel easier? Well, this is your business coming to you and saying, hey, CEO, we need to rebuild something at a higher level. And it's not because the old way was wrong. It got you to where you are today. But that old way may not be able to take you where you want to go. A solo or early stage design firm can run on that memory and instinct and taste and speed and all those personal relationships you work so hard to develop. But a growing design firm, it's going to need something more. It needs standards, it needs processes and visibility, clarity and decision rights and client education, and most importantly, repeatable excellence. That is the game changer, because the goal is not to become less personal. Instead, it's to stop relying on personal overextension as the delivery system for excellence. Those are two different things. So your work should still feel elevated and your clients should still feel deeply cared for. Your point of view should still be unmistakable, but the experience cannot depend on you personally remembering, approving, rescuing, and emotionally carrying every single part of the project. See, that isn't scale. That is self-sacrifice with a better logo on board. Let's talk about the trade-offs, because they're here. You have to trade control for capacity, and this is the hardest one I see for most designers. You cannot have maximum control and have maximum capacity at the same time and let them coexist. If every decision is hinging on you and your availability is finite, your firm's going to hit a ceiling, and there's nothing you can do about that. See, the deeper question you need to be asking is not, how do I get my team to do it exactly like me? I want to give you a better question. What must remain mine and what can be taught? Your taste can be taught through examples, and your communication style can be taught through templates and reviews. Your sourcing standards can be taught through criteria. Your client experience can be taught through process, and your decision making can be taught through frameworks. It's not going to be perfect overnight. This requires intentionality over time. We're not trying to clone you. That is not the goal. Instead, it is to build a firm that knows how to critically think. All right, trade-off number 2, you're going to trade speed for strength. And in the early days, speed felt like service. You could answer quickly, accommodate, squeeze things in, deal with urgency, and clients loved it until the business grew and that level of reactivity becomes physically impassable. A more mature firm often has to slow down in specific places so the whole project can move better. So maybe slow down the onboarding so the client understands the process, or slow down the scope so expectations are clear and you have parameters for scope creep. Maybe slow down procurement approvals so they are clean. And maybe you slow down hiring so you're not adding a person to chaos. I can't tell you how much I see this in my coaching practice. I'm overwhelmed. I got to get somebody in. Well, when you bring them in, do they know what they're supposed to do? Do they have the systems and the processes? Do they know what their checklist is? Do they know where they fit into the larger wheel? Well, no, but I got to get somebody in. Well, that's not fair to them or you to bring them in if you don't have those systems in place. See, you may slow down after project completion so the time can debrief and you can really focus on improving. And this isn't inefficiency. This is you being a CEO and leading from the front, because speed without structure creates fragility. Strength comes from building checkpoints that prevent the same problems from repeating themselves. Okay, the other trade-off I want to give you, you trade being needed for being effective. And this one is deeply emotional. If you built your business around your talent, being needed can feel like, gosh, I really matter. Your client wants you, your team needs you, the project depends on you, the details require you, and that can feel very dangerously validating. There's a cost to it. If being needed becomes your measure of value, you are going to unconsciously keep the business dependent upon you. But your value is not in being the only person who can do everything. Instead, it is in building the standard, teaching the standard, and protecting the standard at scale. And that is a deeper kind of leadership. All right, trade-off number 4 I want to talk with you about. You're trading revenue ego for profit discipline. I love this one. There's a big difference between a firm that is busy and a firm that is healthy. And there is also a big difference between impressive revenue and real profit. A design firm can have large projects and a beautiful Instagram presence and a full calendar and be financially a disaster behind the scenes. In fact, ASID's 2025 economic outlook pointed to pressures like tariffs, labor costs, interest rates, and construction uncertainty affecting design and renovation conditions. And that matters because when projects become more complex, your pricing and operations have to be more sophisticated to keep up with the dance. You need to know whether your service is priced for the actual level of time and communication and revisions and project management and emotional labor required. You need to know where your profit is leaking. You need to know whether your team is being used well. And you need to know whether you are over-delivering because you're afraid of disappointing the client. See, it is just a more expensive version of overwhelm when we talk about growth without profit discipline. Finally, I want to talk with you about the fifth trade-off. You're trading unlimited access for a better experience. And this is the one of the most important client experience shifts I will ever talk with you about. Because as your firm grows, clients cannot have unlimited access to you and still receive a consistently excellent experience. And listen closely. This sounds completely counterintuitive, but it is 100% true. When everything runs through you as the principal designer, communication slows down, decisions pile up, and the client experience becomes dependent on your bandwidth. A better experience is not always more access. Instead, it's about clarity. What does the client go to, or who do they go to for what? When will they hear from the team? When are you involved? What milestones get your eyes? How are decisions made? And what happens when something changes? See, clients do not need constant access as much as they need confidence. They need to feel guided. This is why we talk about that client relationship as a dance. You have to lead. So instead of positioning your team to like a substitute for you, position them as part of your method. Let me give you an example. You might say our project manager will be your main point of contact for weekly updates and day-to-day coordination. She and I meet internally to review design direction, budget, timeline, key decisions. So while she keeps the project moving, I remain closely involved in the creative leadership and major milestones. That specific language I just shared with you really matters. It tells the client they are not being passed off. You are being supported by a firm with a process instead. So, what do you do with all this? I want to give you 3 practical places to start. First, find the bottleneck in your business. Ask yourself, where does the business stop unless I personally step in? Second, write the rule that currently lives in your head. If your team keeps bringing you sourcing options that miss the mark, write the sourcing rules. Third, I want you to define your true principal level work. Ask yourself honestly, what work actually requires my eye, my expertise, my relationship, or my authority? And what work am I holding because I'm used to holding this? You may need to own the creative concept in the final design review, the sales conversation, maybe it's the client relationships at key milestones, but you may not need to own every follow-up, selection draft, vendor email, etc. The goal is for you to not disappear from your business. Instead, hear me loud and clear. The goal is to place yourself where your involvement creates the most value for you and your client. Here's that mindset shift I want you to sit with. The business that got you here, that built around your excellence, I want you to think about the business that takes you further and has to be built around transferable excellence instead. And that means your job is going to change because you're not just creating beautiful rooms, you're creating the conditions that allow beautiful rooms to be delivered consistently. See, you're not just making the decisions, you're teaching the business how decisions get made. And you're not just protecting the client experience, you're designing the client experience. Your new belief has to be, I do not have to hold every detail to protect the standard. I have to build the structure that protects the standard. I want that to be your mantra out of this episode. I do not have to hold every detail to protect the standard. I have to build the structure that protects that standard. That is a very different way to lead. And I know that this feels deeply uncomfortable because there is a little grief in growth. Yeah, I've grieved it. I've grieved the simplicity of the early days and being the one who knew everything. There are times we hop on and go through client cards and all of our projects and running 60 to 80 projects coast to coast. I have to be like, remind me again, what are we doing at this property? And then it'll trigger a thought. Yeah, maybe you grieve the season where the business felt more personal and less operational. And you may grieve parts of the work you just need to release. And that does not mean you're ungrateful. It means your role is evolving. Your team is supporting you. And the more willing you are to evolve with it, the less painful growth becomes. If this episode resonates with you and your firm is feeling heavier than you expected, I want you to take a breath. You're not behind, you're not failing. You are likely standing in the exact place where many talented designers I work with get stuck. The business is too big to run casually, but not yet structured enough to run smoothly. And that stage requires a new kind of leadership, and one that I am ready to sit down and talk with you about. I want you to build a better firm that is as thoughtfully designed as the spaces you're creating. If you want to hop on a complimentary call with me, head over to fixmydesignbiz.com. Again, fixmydesignbiz.com. And let's see how we can build a business that works for you rather than you working for it, and have the honest conversation about what it really takes to be the CEO in the seat rather than a business owner. Until next time, take care.